Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr, and if you've been following for a little while, you've probably come to realise that this video is one I've been waiting to make for Dissidia Omnia for a while. And that's because today we're going to be looking at my favourite character in the entire franchise of Final Fantasy, Kuja. Now, Kuja is my favourite character for very many reasons, which I won't go into in this video, but if you'd like to know more about why, then feel free to drop me a message on Discord or anything. But we're going to be looking at Bahamut's summon board, the event and the Lufenia that comes along with it, and of course Kuja, his rework, his LD, his burst, and all the good stuff that's going to be coming along with him. Now, like I said, I've been really excited for this particular character for quite a long time, and I hope that you guys are too. And if you'd like to find out more about him, then stay tuned and keep on watching. As always guys, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below. That's Twitter, Twitch, Discord and Patreon. Twitch this week, I'm obviously going to be showcasing anything that happens with Bahamut summon boards when it comes up next Tuesday. But in the meantime, for the weekend, I'm actually going to be streaming my Final Fantasy count up. I should be continuing with Final Fantasy 1 tomorrow night, and I will also be doing some more FF14 on Sunday, and I do also have an extra bonus stream on Saturday for those of you who'd like to come, and we should be revealing more about that very soon. It's not next-gen consoles. And also on Patreon, I do like to give a shout out to each of my patrons once every video so that I can give my thanks to each and every person that supports the channel as much as they do. And this time around, it's going to be Yakko CMN, who is himself actually a very successful content creator. So to catch the eye of someone who's done very well with these platforms as much as he has is actually really humbling, and I'm very thankful for that. And if you would like a title card just like Yakko does just down here, or you'd like to take part in the Would You Pull portion of my videos, or you'd like to take part in other benefits like voice chats with me every month as well, then feel free to have a look at my Patreon and perhaps consider becoming a patron yourself. Don't forget to check out all of the links all around me just in the description box below with all kinds of websites relating to Omnia, and of course don't forget to check out all the other content creators out there besides myself. So let's get started here by looking at the banner and all the characters etc. that are included with Bahamut's boards, and of course Kuja. Now, the banners themselves are predominantly all about Kuja. He's the only character that gets anything new out of these banners, though if you missed characters like Porum or Garnet the first time around, they might make nice consolation prizes for you if you decide to pull on them. Now, when it comes to Kuja, I have a small confession to make. Up until this point in Omnia, I didn't actually like Kuja very much in the game itself because he was very much just a selfish damage dealer that dealt decent AoE damage, but that was kind of it. He was a bit slow off the mark. He had to build up these stacks of soul cleave by using either his bravery or HP plus, or wasting one of his skills when it wasn't the plus version of itself by having the maximum number of stacks. I actually didn't like using him. I straight up just didn't like him. However, with his rework, his LD, and his burst, I'm actually now very excited to use Kuja because now he's not such a selfish damage dealer. He does actually provide some really nice party-wide benefits that he never had before. But first things first, we're actually going to change the way that we talk about some of the stuff here. And we're going to talk about the skills individually so that I can include little bits of gameplay footage of Kuja using his skills, etc. Because it's something that my viewers have asked me for hundreds of times, and I've been trying desperately to figure out how to get it to work. So let me know if you actually like the changes to the visuals on this front. But Ring Holy was always a skill that Kuja never really used originally. It was like disparate in its bravery damage because it wasn't AoE bravery damage, it was kind of split AoE damage where it would, if you had like 3 targets for example, it would hit like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and then do the HP attack on the target. Whereas now you get an extra use of it, which is always welcome. You get 50% splash damage, which is great because he never had that before, and you also get a new debuff on it to all enemies that he targets that makes it so that it's a Holy Imperil attack as well as lowering their speed. Now, Kuja's very good at increasing his own speed and actually later on increasing the party's as well. So combining this framed Imperil debuff with other speed debuffs or other framed debuffs, I mean, you guys know how much I love playing with debuffs anyway, but this one actually makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. And Ring Holy itself is a holy attack, so it's going to benefit from that in a great deal. Now, Ultima doesn't actually have any kind of rework here, but it does benefit from a lot of Kuja's new toys. Now, Ultima was very much just your go-to attack. It did double the amount of damage if it was the plus version of itself, and realistically should only really be using it if it is the plus version of itself, whereas Ring Holy just gets more Brave Overflow from it being its plus version. But if you get Ultima off while you taking advantage of the buffs and debuffs that Kuja provides, it is still going to deal a pretty hefty amount of damage, like far more than you might think. But his EX attack saved one of his problems originally, which was the fact that originally when you had these Soul Cleave stacks that you would have to stack up after using either some of the lesser versions of his skills or his HP plus that could help you get to Soul Cleave at level 4, which then gave you the plus variants of Ultima and Ring Holy, so you then get the double HP dump from Ultima, you'd then lose them. But the EX helps it quite a lot. Like when his EX first came out, the main thing about it was that it provided the Darkness of Eternity buff, which is a framed buff that increases his party's attack and speed, which is great on its own, and it also makes it so that Soul Cleave doesn't deteriorate when you use the plus versions of his skills. Not only that, but it is actually a AoE Brave HP attack that does 100% of HP to all targets, so it actually works out really nicely in that way. The plus version of itself made it so that it had a faster recast rate, which is fantastic, and it also gave you the ability to have the Darkness of Eternity from the start of the fight, which doesn't sound like much on its own, but it did rectify half of Kuja's problem, where once you got the stacks, you would then lose them, and now you don't. But you'd still have to build them up from the beginning, so he was still a little bit slow off the mark. He also did get a HP attack plus that was relatively decent at the time, but it was nothing particularly special. Enter the LD. Seraphic Star is fantastic. Now, first thing I will say about Seraphic Star is it does an absolute truckload of damage. Damage like you've not really seen in the game up until this point, except maybe from Vivi. Now, what this is it's a Brave HP attack that hits 7 times, and it refunds bravery from each of the HP attacks. Now, we've seen this happen on maybe like 2 or 3 HP dumps. This one has 7, and it's really, really powerful. It's also holy, so it's going to take advantage of the debuff that Ring Holy now provides, so it's going to give you weakness damage. So you're going to hit really hard with this anyway. Its potency is also surprisingly high, so you're going to hit hard with this. If you are a fan of summon board farming, or if you're not a fan of summon board farming more specifically, Kuja will help you to no end with this. The fact that he is the super synergy character for Bahamut, like the go-to, it helps that if you want to just blitz out all of your summon boards, you can one-shot Ifrit with this attack. Now, I know a lot of people have probably farmed Ifrit to hell and back, ironically. But if you haven't, Kuja will just one-shot him with Seraphic Star. It does that much damage. And that's not even the only thing that it does. It also gives you a special effect buff, so one that sits above your buffs, called Terra's Crystal. Now, this is where I really like what they've done with Kuja, because they've turned him from just a basic selfish damage-dealing character into an offensive support / damage character by giving him Holy Enchant on his LD, which I will say, he only gets 3 uses of his LD if you don't have his burst, and that Holy Enchant has to last. It does last for 12 turns at a time when you use it, but you're going to want to be sparing on the timings in which you use it. But it also raises your party's max bravery and attack, which is their offensive stats, in combination with the Darkness of Eternity buff that also boosts their attack even more, and then speed. And the fact that he does quite as much damage as he does through his LD, and now Ring Holy and Ultima, because if he's got the party enchant, Ultima becomes holy, and therefore it is buffed despite the fact that it didn't get reworked itself. Kuja just churns out damage, which for a character that's meant to be more support-based is a lovely thing to see. He also now starts the fight with his Soul Cleave stacks maxed out. This was the other half of the problem that Kuja had to begin with, where he'd have to build up the stacks to get to his EX, use his EX so that, like, I mean, he'd be able to have his buff, and then you just have to keep on top of it from that point onwards. So you had that kind of slow build-up. Well, you don't have that anymore, because he starts with Dark into the Darts of Eternity because of his EX+, and now he starts with his Soul Cleave buff maxed out. So unless you're really struggling or you're not paying attention to when his buffs are going to run out, or basically whenever you're not using his EX at every given opportunity, which given the amount of damage it does, you probably should be anyway, you're never going to run out of Soul Cleave. You will have the plus versions of his attacks at all times. And he also has a new HP plus and Brave plus, which change Holy, which makes a big difference given that Holy Imperil is now a big part of his kit. And it's a 3-hit Brave HP attack with, you know, it's got more potency on it, as most upgrades to these things do, and it just helps a lot. And then his LD is just really powerful. Like, it's not one of these things that, like, you're going to look at it and go, well, I'm going to use this in every fight ever, because there are enemies that resist Holy, and they do become increasingly common as time goes on. But there are a lot of situations where you don't get much better in terms of magic damage than Kuja at this point. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to pull for Kuja because Tifa LD is better than it. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Tifa's LD does do more damage than Kuja's, but Tifa is 8 months away. Like, Tifa is a long way away from now. So if Tifa is the first thing that comes to people's mind when they think, oh, it does more damage than Kuja, then surely the damage output of Kuja's LD is something not to sniff at if it lasts that long before it gets kind of, like, taken over by Tifa. And we've also got LD boards coming for him that increase the Brave Overflow of your party much later on when he gets his LD boards nearer to when Ishtola gets her burst. But there's a pretty bright future ahead of Kuja with his LD. And this is coming from a non-biased perspective. Obviously, I am terribly biased, but I'll be terribly biased about his burst. His LD is just good. I'll just say that. His LD is very strong. But when we come to his burst, now his burst is a really nice thing to have. Now, for me, as you can see from the footage that I'm showing now, I have to have this. Kuja is my favourite character in the entire franchise. I've used him as a mascot for my videos for years at this point. For me to not pull for a burst that has Trance Kuja in it would be criminal. However, I am going to talk about it from a non-biased perspective because I don't think it's mandatory for everybody. What Kuja's burst effect actually does, apart from the fact you get an extra use of Seraphic Staff, so that's like multiplicative amounts of damage just by having an extra use of it, and you get even more of the Holy Enchant, and you know, it's a damage dealing burst, so therefore you are going to use it if you have it. The burst effect is an increase in bravery damage from your party and a stronger Holy Enchant. When we've looked at Enchant Imperil in the past, we've only ever seen it as this character is enchanted with this element. This enemy is imperiled by this element. Whereas Kuja introduces like different levels of enchantment, and all it really means is it will deal a larger amount of damage to enemies that are weaker to that element, like in regards to the damage calculations. If you have a higher Holy Enchant, like as it says here, it's 50%, with his LD it's 20%, you'll obviously deal more damage to weakness with a 50% Holy Enchant than you would with a 20% one. But because they're buffs, because they're special effects, they actually stack to make it even stronger. So that's just a short explanation of how it's worded now here. But it also, basically you get the typical stuff of max bravery damage limit and increased bravery overflow. But basically it's just your party does more bravery damage. It doesn't sound like much, but when it comes to enemies, like as Lufenia progresses, that resist bravery damage or have like bravery damage modifiers that make it so that they take a lot less, that 50% increase actually isn't too bad. And it obviously means that you can space out your LD buffs more so that you get a much, much longer lasting Holy Enchantment than just the 3 uses of the LD. Do I think this is mandatory for most players? No, honestly not. I think the LD is really powerful, but the burst, not so much. Like, I think, like, and if you're not that fussed by magic damage dealers, you've got VV, he's an enchant, or he's an Imperiler. He doesn't enchant your party, but he is an Imperiler. You've got Strago, who has instant break. There are characters coming out in the future that you might want that have, like, enchant Imperil. Paladin Cecil is a holy enchant Imperiler that's very popular, and obviously is another one of my favorite characters that happens to be really powerful. but Kuja's not going to do you wrong. If you want magic damage, or you want an enchant Imperialer, because I think it's important to have a wide variety of different elemental enchanters, and Imperialers obviously, and to have a holy one is just another arrow in your quiver. So just to have Kuja is useful, and Kuja pairs up really nicely with other offensive support characters. The best example of which we've recently just had, Kurasame. Kurasame increases the amount of HP damage that you deal. Kuja increases the amount of bravery damage that you deal, and does an absolute boatload of damage with his LD. So putting 2 and 2 together seems pretty damn good to me. Once again, Kuja actually has the Unity keystone for his high armor, and given that, like Kurasame, he's an offensive support-based character, I definitely think that his high armor is worth picking up. I don't think it's mandatory, but I think that if he's a character that you're likely to use a lot, and Lord knows that I'm going to, then I think that his armor is well worth picking up. It's further support for your party in an offensive manner, which just plays into what Kuja does. So if you spend your high armor tokens on Kuja, if you've got everything for his kit, especially if you have his burst, then it's not going to be a waste for you. In terms of his artifacts, he hasn't got anything super special or anything. His C50 you could argue for, but the fact that it increases his speed might be a bad thing, because if he's increasing his own speed and not the party's, he's going to run his buffs dry that much faster than having the party members be able to take advantage of them. So realistically, just going for the core stats is probably the way you want to go with Kuja. So now that I've gushed over Kuja for the last 10 minutes, let's talk about the Lufenia that's going to come along with Bahamut. And before I do so, I do want to quickly point out that Bahamut is the last summon board that we're going to get of the current kind of batch of summon boards that we're ever going to have, because the next one that we're going to get is going to be the first Divine Summon board. And Divine Summon boards function a little differently from our regular ones that we've been used to for the last year or so. So rewards are going to be different. So the first thing I will point out, and it's something I probably should have mentioned with greater emphasis in my high armor video, is this is the last time you're going to be able to get a very large number of armor tokens, regular armor tokens, before the Divine boards come along that don't actually give you any. So while we're going to be getting loads of resources, gems, tickets, do pay attention to the fact that you're going to be getting regular armor tokens, and you may want to consider saving some of those, because I've heard from a lot of JP players that if you're not careful with them at the very least, you may run into a bit of a drought with them, as opposed to just worrying about high armor. But let's talk about Neo Bahamut, which is the actual Lufenia fight that you're going to have. Now, Neo Bahamut's main shtick is that he locks your entire party into attacking him, whilst also summoning these crystals called Dragon Stars that will do regular HP attacks, and if left for too long will just wipe your party. And I'm talking like 2 attacks. They'll just wipe your party if you don't kill them quickly. And he summons these at various different HP thresholds, and after he uses his recast attack. So you're going to want to take these out, but you can't target them. So the name of the game is AoE damage. So you're going to want to be able to bring characters that can deal a large amount of AoE damage. Now, the Lufenia Orb itself appears at the start of the fight, so you're going to have to keep on top of it until you've taken him under 80% HP, and then it will appear again when he goes to 50% HP, or just under 50% HP, and it will stay there until he dies. And the trigger for this is that he wants holy damage. Now, holy damage dealers, if you've got Kuja, you will not have to worry about his main mechanics at all, because he is a heavy, holy AoE damage dealer. So you don't have to worry about the crystals, and you don't have to worry about the Lufenia Orb. And he also enchants the party. But because the orb only ticks down when, or increases by 1 when he takes bravery damage that's holy, you're not going to be able to rely on just one character to deal the holy damage. And outside of Kuja, a lot of our holy damage dealers are either a bit they're not so great on the damage front, like the Paladin Cecil, or they're not so great in terms of just being a good character like Aiko. Then you haven't got that many options in terms of it. You can use Realm, Realm will get the job done. Most clears that you find online for Neo Bahamut will contain Kuja in some capacity or another, but there are alternatives. Like I said, Paladin Cecil might not be that great in terms of his damage output these days, but he does enough. And he also has a temporary party enchant, so if you're on top of it, you can actually time these correctly so that you can take advantage of it, like boss the rest of it, like the first amount of his HP down. You can take Alexander so that you're doing holy damage through that. You could also, like, you can pair up different characters that can take advantage of the fact that you have the holy enchant from Cecil. He has his holy imperil. He also does holy damage with the majority of his attacks, so he is probably a great shout for you to use. But don't forget to bring somebody that can deal with the crystals as well, because Paladin Cecil's not so hot on the AoE damage front. Like, he's got splash damage from his EX, and he's got his Holy Flame, and he's got a little bit of splash damage on his HP+, but it's not going to be enough to deal with the crystals alone. So just make sure you're taking somebody that can deal holy damage, and somebody who can take AoE damage, and then that's going to work out well for you. There are actually two different methods that you can kind of get around having to bring like tons and tons of sources of holy damage. The first of which is bringing Edge. A lot of the big HP attacks can actually be dodged, so as long as you have a good sense of timing on Edge's EX attack, then you can actually use that to get around the Lufenia attack, the Recast attack, the Crystal's big attacks. Just be careful of the fact that Edge obviously doesn't have the greatest amount of AoE damage, and he's not even that high on single target damage these days either, so make sure you're bringing damage dealers to compensate for this. Otherwise, the other method that you can do, and I want to give a shout out to VPower, as I've left a screenshot from the Tonbridge Troops research here as well, as I always do, because I wanted to give support to those guys as much as anybody else. But VPower had a video where he only uses a Jack and a Kuja friend to make it so that you're just getting a continuous amount of attacks over and over and over again until Bahamut falls down dead. And the reason that this works is that Bahamut makes it so that there is a sap element going on, like at the beginning of every turn while he's got his crystals active, and also during that time neither he nor the crystals can be delayed or broken, or they can be broken but they don't get delayed by being broken, which is normally a bad thing. But Jack can 100% take advantage of this, because all you need to do is summon a Kuja friend, use his LD so that you've got the Terra's Crystal active, and then you just go in with Jack and you just use his HP plus repeatedly over and over and over again until you need to refresh his buffs. Then you use a skill and then you just carry on, and this will last you until Bahamut is dead. I will leave a link in the description box to this video because you need to see it. So if you don't want to pull for Kuja, or if you're saving resources for somebody else, there are like cheesy ways to get around Bahamut if you need them. So now we come to the big question: should you pull on either of Kuja's banners? Yes, you should. There's no bias whatsoever within this video. You should pull for Kuja right now, and anything I say from this point onwards should be a moot point. I'm kidding, obviously. I am obviously going to be pulling for Kuja. However, I'm not going to be pulling for his burst straight away. I think that if you are going to be pulling for Kuja, prioritize the LD. Don't go after the burst. If you get it, fantastic. I want it because I want the TRANCE KUJA like realness that makes my eyes bleed because of how pretty it is in my life, but you don't need it. The reasons that you would want Kuja in your roster is that he just makes summon board farming way quicker, way easier. He's like a quality of life improvement in that regard just by having that on its own. So I think that like people who perhaps haven't caught up when it came to summon board farming or anything like that, they are probably going to want Kuja just so they can make that process that much quicker. He's also a really great friend unit. Like, in a similar way to a Mid-Italian. Like, a Mid-Italian's been people's go-to friend unit since they came out. And Kuja is actually a very, very decent replacement for them, because that damage output on the LD is just that high that you can just use that over and over again and things just fall down, and it really does do a crazy amount of damage for how quickly you can get it out. Like, it doesn't require setup really, you just use it and then he leaves and then the job's done. I also have a big affinity for Imperil enchanters, especially ones that have like party-wide support in the same way that Kuja does. I think that Kuja's like transformation from a selfish damage dealer to a party offensive support like damage dealer hybrid is actually really nice. So if that kind of thing appeals to you, I would love to have a enchant Imperiler of every element so that I could bring them to whichever event needed them as the need for them arised. But there are reasons also not to pull for Kuja. Like, I mean, people want Lightning and Gladiolus. And with Gladiolus in particular, if you are pulling for Kuja, definitely don't pull for the burst, because there's a good chance that you might get it on the way to getting Gladio if you're using gems on that banner. There is no reason to go for his burst now. Even I'm not going for his burst straight away because I plan on pulling for Gladio. So there's that to bear in mind. If you're trying to pull for his LD, then great. If you get the burst along the way, then great. But if you get the LD, stop. Wait until Gladio comes around, try and grab him, and then you might get the burst along the way for that. My personal plan, because Kuja is my favourite character, if I don't get the burst on either of them, that'll be when I start using burst tokens to get it. But for most people, those burst tokens are going to go to Lightning. Lightning is a character that everybody wants, and her banners, like after the gauntlet of banners that we've had, like we've had Kurosame, which has sucked up a lot of resources, mine included if you saw my last video. You know, we've got Kuja, we've got Gladio, and then Lightning comes about, and then she will absolutely decimate your resources as well, because she is a character that you probably are going to want the burst for, so she's going to suck up a lot of resources. So if you need to save, you can live without Kuja. Holy is an element that gets resisted a lot, so like as time progresses, and there is another Holy Enchant Imperialer with a burst that's probably stronger, although they go very well together, in Paladin Cecil. Because Paladin Cecil is a character that just does everything. He does the healing, he does the tanking, he does the damage, he does the enchanting, he does the imperial, he does everything. He does so he is a character that you could wait for if you wanted an Enchanting Imperialer but you didn't necessarily want to pull for Kuja. I'm going to pull for him because he's my favourite character, and I think that if I turn around and said, I'm not going to pull for him, I think I'd probably lose half of my subscriber base just because I'd be lying to your faces. So I'm going to pull for him, and I think that a large majority of players are going to pull for him because of the damage scaling of his LD alone, but he's got a lot more to offer than that. So I think that people would definitely be remiss to not give him a look, but if you are saving for other characters that are more pressing, then that's not a bad thing either. So now it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, can let me and everyone else know whether you would or wouldn't pull on a banner and give your reasons why as well. So I think everyone that I've asked here over on Patreon has pretty much the same idea as me, or at least a large majority of people have very much the same idea as me when it comes to Kuja, in that they're going to spend tickets on the banner. 56% of people said that they were going to spend tickets on the banner, 28% of people said that they were going to spend gems on the banner, and 17% of people said that they were going to skip Kuja entirely. And I think the reason that people are going to use tickets on this banner rather than gems, despite the fact that a lot of people that I know obviously have a, same as me, have a big fondness for Kuja, is because of two reasons. Now, his banner mates, personally, I don't need any of them. Like, if you need Garnet or Porum, they're nice extras, but I wouldn't go chasing them at this point, except maybe Garnet. Garnet is still pretty useful in a lot of ways. And the other reason is that you're only really wanting the LD off this banner. There are other banners in Gao and Gladiolus that have Kuja's burst featured on them, and they're both extremely good, particularly Gladiolus. So if you're going to be using gems on that banner, the worst thing you can do is pull the burst on Kuja's banner and then go pitying it on that and then pull it while you're pulling for Gladiolus. There's nothing worse. Anyways, Gemekai here says that my current strategy is about 50 to 100 tickets for the EX and then switch over to the other banner to spend gems for the LD and to stop when it appears. So this is interesting for people who perhaps don't have the EX as well. Kuja is a powerful favourite who does great damage, and I'd like to fully build him out. I'm wary about him being so close to Gladio and Lightning, but hopefully the Bahamut boards will help alleviate the pain. This is important because, yeah, Kuja is on a summon board, which means that you're going to get 400 to 500 tickets. You're going to get 40 to 50,000 gems, so it is going to help alleviate that pain. If you do end up having to go really deep into get Kuja stuff, you're still going to be able to have that stuff for later, and hopefully you'll be able to make it last over that time, and hopefully my luck, speaking from a personal standpoint here, hopefully my luck plays out for Kuja better than it did Kurosame, because I really don't want to go through that again. Fantendo says, I plan to pull on this banner with tickets mainly because I'll also be pulling on the other two banners, Gao and Gladio as well. Hopefully I can manage to pull his LD with tickets, hopefully get Gao's with their tickets as well, and then full gems on Gladio. I would like his burst, however I'm really only trying to get his LD and don't really feel the need to go out for the burst. Make my summon boards faster and great Holy Enchanter Imperial. Pretty much everything that I've said when it came to Kuja. He is great. He's an Enchanting Perillar. He makes your summon board super quick. He's not the character that you're going to use in every Lufenia. And I will say that now. He's super powerful. He's going to be used as a friend unit a lot. He's going to be used as for summon boards and stuff. He's not the prime candidate for every Lufenia that comes along. So if you are skipping Kuja, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, apart from the judgment you'll get from me for scorning my favourite character. Patch says, just going in with tickets. As awesome as Kuja's burst looks, I'm prioritising his LD. I need to save as much as I can for the upcoming banners like Gladio, Lightning and Rude. So again, while Kuja is a great character, Gladio and Lightning, and then a little bit later on Rude as well, are going to be far more pressing when it comes to your resources. So while there's quite a lot of us that are going to be using resources from Bahamut to try and get Kuja and the stuff after it, you could just not pull for Kuja, and then you've got this ridiculously large stack of resources that you can save for your Gladios and your Lightnings. And then Will Trimble here says, as much as I love Kuja, it'll sadly only be a small amount of tickets that I have budgeted for him. I'll be doing what many players are doing and going strictly for Gladio and Lightning, as they, from what I've seen, are far more pressing for Lufenia clears. So again, most people are going to go in with tickets for Kuja, because while he's a favourite for myself and quite a lot of other characters, or at least the ones that I've spoken to, he is a great character. He's not perfect. He's there are a lot of other characters that are more pressing than him, because you can take Kuja to Lufenia. I say that he's not very good, or I say that he's not the best for it. He's still pretty damn great. That LD is gonna do you some work for quite some time, and then he does get his LD boards later on. So he's got longevity, he's got everything there. Yes, I do have a little bit of bias towards the character because he's my favourite, but while I think that there are reasons not to pull for him, mainly because the other characters following him are that much more pressing, there's a lot of reasons to grab him as well. So that's going to be it for today's video. Let me know in the comments below, obviously, if you're planning on pulling for Kuja or if you're planning to skip Kuja. A big thank you to all of my patrons who commented and voted on the Would You Pull section of Kuja and of the video, so I can get everybody's opinion. So it's not just me that you're hearing about, where you're hearing from when it comes to these characters in terms of recommendations. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click that bell for notifications, and perhaps check out some of my other videos as well. I have been branching out a little bit from Omnia, covering the mainline Final Fantasy series, and I've also got some more reviews and things like that coming in the near future as well. So let me know if you're enjoying that stuff, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care everyone, and enjoy Kuja if you do manage to pull him. Bye now.